Imagine this. Your heart just stopped beating. The doctor has called the time of death. The people around you are crying. But there's one question that no scientist, no philosopher, and no religious leader has been able to answer with 100% certainty. At that moment, where are you? Or whatever you used to be. Does everything just end, like a TV switching off and the screen going black? Or does that thing inside you that could feel, that could experience, that could think, the thing Hindu scripture calls the Aatma, Christianity calls the soul, Islam calls the ruh, does it go somewhere else? This video isn't here to preach any one religion, and it's not here to convince you that heaven exists or doesn't. This is an attempt to look at one of the hardest questions humans have ever asked through science, philosophy, and different religious traditions, without picking a side. Because honestly, nobody has the final answer. But the evidence, the experiences, and the arguments that do exist are worth looking at carefully. So let's start with the thing we understand most confidently, what actually happens to your body and brain right after death. When your heart stops beating, that moment is clinically called death. But here's the first surprising fact. Death isn't a single moment, it's a process. Even after the heart stops, the brain doesn't shut off instantly. Within seconds of blood flow stopping, oxygen starts running out, and brain cells begin sending out distress signals. In 2013, researchers at the University of Michigan ran an experiment on rats when their hearts were artificially stopped. In the first 30 seconds after clinical death, their brains showed a dramatic surge in electrical activity, higher than even their normal waking state. Gamma waves, which in humans are associated with highly conscious, alert thinking, spiked sharply. A lot of people use this discovery to try and explain near-death experiences, or NDEs. Many people who were revived after cardiac arrest have reported feeling like they were floating outside their own body, watching themselves from above, seeing something like a tunnel with a light at the end of it. A sense of meeting deceased, relatives or beings of light, watching their entire life flash before them like a highlight reel. In 2019, Dr. Sam Parnia at NYU Langone published a large study called AWARE-2, involving cardiac arrest survivors. He found that around 40% of patients reported some form of conscious awareness during the period when their heart wasn't beating, a period when, clinically, they could have been declared dead. Now, there are two ways to interpret this, and both matter. The scientific materialist interpretation is that this is all brain chemistry. When oxygen levels drop, a state called hypoxia, the brain produces hallucinations. The tunnel vision effect could be explained by oxygen loss in the retina, the life flashing before your eyes. Experience could come from abnormal electrical activity in the temporal lobe. And that gamma wave surge we just talked about could be the dying brain's last burst, like a bulb that flares up brighter right before it burns out. The other interpretation, one held by several NDE researchers and spiritually inclined thinkers, is different. If brain activity spikes so dramatically at a point when, technically, no conscious experience should be possible at all, maybe consciousness isn't limited to the brain. Maybe the brain works more like a... One thing is completely clear. The body goes through a well-documented, predictable process after death. Cells begin breaking down, decomposition starts, and rigor mortis sets in due to calcium buildup in the muscles. We understand all of that. The real question is what happens to the thing that was running that body, the awareness, the experience, the sense of me, after it's gone. To explore that, let's turn to the religious and philosophical traditions, because humans have been wrestling with exactly this question for thousands of years. In the Indian subcontinent, the concept of the Atma is central, especially in the Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 2 of the Gita, Krishna explains to Arjuna that the Atma is never born and never dies. The idea is that who you really are isn't just your body. In this philosophy, the body is treated like clothing that the Atma wears. Just as you take off old clothes and put on new ones, the Atma leaves one body and moves into another. This is the concept of punarjanma, or reincarnation. According to this philosophy, death is simply a transition, not an ending. What you really are is consciousness, and that consciousness is eternal. The body is just a temporary vehicle that this consciousness travels in. The Upanishads go even deeper into this idea. In the Chandogya Upanishad, there's a famous phrase, Tattvam Asi, meaning you are that, referring to Brahman, the ultimate universal reality. The idea is that our individual consciousness, called the Jivatma, is ultimately part of that larger universal consciousness, Brahman. Like a single drop of the ocean looks separate, but is ultimately part of the ocean itself. In this framework, moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirth, is the final goal. Once the Atma completes its karma and realizes its true nature, it becomes free from this cycle entirely. Interestingly, this isn't treated as just a belief by everyone. Many people claim there's actual evidence behind it. Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, spent his career studying more than 2,500 cases where young children described details of a previous life, the name of a village, the name of a family member, even how they supposedly died, details that were later verified. Skeptics argue this could be coincidence, memory contamination, or family influence. Believers argue this is strong empirical evidence for reincarnation. Neither side has fully convinced the other, and this debate remains unsettled within the scientific community. Hinduism isn't the only tradition wrestling with this question. Every major world religion has approached it in its own way. Buddhism, which actually grew out of Hindu philosophical traditions, takes a surprisingly different view on the Atma. The Buddha taught the concept of anatta, meaning no self. According to this teaching, there is no permanent, unchanging Atma at all. What we call I is simply a continuously changing process, like a river that's different every moment but is still given one name. So how does rebirth happen if there's no fixed self to transfer? Buddhist philosophy explains this using the analogy of one candle lighting another. The flame isn't literally the same flame, but it's connected to it. It continues from it. This is called rebirth, not reincarnation, a subtle but important distinction. Christianity, Islam, and Judaism approach the concept somewhat differently. In all three, a person has a soul that goes through some form of judgment after the body dies. In Islam, this is tied to the day of judgment, Qiyamah, when every person will be held accountable for their deeds. Christianity similarly holds the concept of a final judgment, where the soul goes to heaven or hell based on faith and actions. Here, reincarnation, being reborn again and again, is generally not accepted. The soul exists once and has a single eternal destination. Judaism's view of the afterlife is less rigidly defined than the other Abrahamic religions. Many Jewish traditions speak of Olam Haba, the world to come, but there's significant diversity in interpretation. Some understand it as physical resurrection, others as spiritual continuation. What's interesting is that despite very different specific mechanisms, almost every major religion agrees on one thing. Consciousness, or the self, continues in some form after the body dies. This is such a widespread human intuition that activity. When the brain stops functioning, consciousness ends with it, the same way software can't run without hardware. There's strong evidence supporting this. When specific parts of the brain are damaged, through stroke, injury, or tumors, personality, memory, and even moral judgment can change dramatically. Take the famous case of Phineas Gage. In 1848, during a railroad construction accident, an iron rod passed straight through his brain. He survived, but his personality changed completely. If the soul were something entirely separate from the body, why would brain damage change someone's personality? Similarly, general anesthesia, the process that puts you to sleep for surgery, temporarily switches off consciousness completely. No dreams, no awareness, nothing at all. This suggests consciousness is directly tied to brain chemistry, but, and this is a big but, consciousness itself remains an unsolved mystery even within science. It's called the hard problem of consciousness, a term coined by philosopher David Chalmers. We know that neurons fire, electrical signals travel through the brain, but how this creates subjective experience, what philosophers call qualia, has no fully satisfying scientific explanation yet. What it actually feels like to see the color red can't be explained by any brain scan. Some physicists and neuroscientists, including Sir Roger Penrose, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, have proposed a controversial theory called orchestrated objective reduction, or ORC-OR. Their claim is that consciousness emerges from quantum mechanical processes happening inside microtubules within brain neurons, and that this quantum information, in their view, could persist in the universe in some form even after the brain itself is destroyed. This theory isn't widely accepted within mainstream physics or neuroscience. Many scientists consider it highly speculative, and the direct experimental evidence supporting it is limited. But it proves that even within hardcore science, the question of consciousness isn't nearly as settled as people often assume. Let's take a more critical look at near-death experiences too, because this topic is often oversimplified from both directions. But skeptics have a fairly strong counter-argument. Being clinically dead doesn't mean the brain is completely inactive. As we discussed earlier, even after an EEG goes flat, there can be residual electrical activity. And these experiences might actually occur while the heart is in the process of stopping, or right as it's being restarted, rather than during the exact dead period itself. Verifying the precise timing is extremely difficult. Here's another interesting fact. Similar experiences, the tunnel, the light, the sense of leaving one's body, have also been reported by fighter pilots who black out under response to extreme stress or oxygen deprivation, rather than specific proof of a soul leaving the body. Even Dr. Sam Parnia, arguably the most respected name in NDE research, doesn't claim that his work proves an afterlife. What he says is that this research shows the relationship between consciousness and brain activity is far more complicated than we used to think, and that this area needs a lot more research. So the honest answer is, NDEs are fascinating, well documented, but they don't definitively prove that a soul exists or that an afterlife is real. What they do show is that we don't fully understand consciousness yet. Honestly, nobody watching this video can walk away with 100% certainty about what happens after death. And anyone who claims to give you a definite answer, whether that's a scientist or a self-proclaimed godman, is worth being a little skeptical of. Here's what we can say. What happens to the body is well understood. Science has done extensive work here. How consciousness actually works remains a genuinely unsolved scientific mystery, and there's no universally accepted solution to the hard problem of consciousness. Different religions give different answers. Some believe in reincarnation, some in a single permanent afterlife, some in no fixed self at all. And these differences come from thousands of years of distinct philosophical and cultural moment a little more meaningfully. If you believe the Aatma is eternal, maybe you feel a different kind of responsibility toward your actions and relationships. This video was never meant to hand you one final answer. It was meant to show you how deep this question really goes and how many brilliant minds, scientists, philosophers, and spiritual teachers alike have spent centuries searching for it. So let us know in the comments, what do you believe? Do you think the Aatma exists, or do you think consciousness is purely brain chemistry? Has anyone close to you, or you yourself, ever had a near-death experience? These conversations tend to get genuinely interesting when people share their own experiences and beliefs, so drop a comment below. If this video made you think about something in a new way, hit like and don't forget to subscribe, because we keep making deep, thought-provoking videos just like this one. See you in the next video. Until then, stay curious and keep asking questions.